The 1960s, a decade of fire and fury, war in Vietnam, streets roaring with protest, a generation searching for its soul. And in the middle of it all, one voice rose above the chaos. Clear, ethereal, unshakable. Joan Baez, a young woman with nothing but a guitar, a song and a belief that music could be a weapon for peace. Her melodies carried the pain of the oppressed, the hope of the dreamers, the defiance of the brave. She stood on the front lines of history, singing through fear, through tears, through nights when the whole world felt like it might fall apart. But who was she, really? Beyond the legend, beyond the anthems and the marches, who was the woman behind the voice that became the conscience of a generation? This is not just the story of Joan Baez. It is a journey into the heart of an artist, and the question her life still asks of us today: can one voice truly change the world? Long before the bright lights, the protests, and the headlines, there was simply a girl, Joan Baez. Born in 1941, the daughter of a physicist and a teacher, moving from place to place as her father's work carried the family across America and beyond. The world she grew up in was filled with contradictions: the promise of progress, the shadow of war, the beauty of music drifting through the radio, and the unease of a country wrestling with its own identity. Joan was shy, almost painfully so, but there was a restlessness inside her, a sense that life had to mean something more. She found her refuge in the songs of the folk tradition, ballads sung by voices from the hills, the fields, the forgotten corners of America, songs that told the truth, even when the truth was uncomfortable. When she first heard the pure, soaring notes of folk legends like Odetta and Pete Seeger, something changed inside her. This wasn't just music, this was storytelling. This was defiance wrapped in melody. This was a way to speak to the world. She picked up a guitar, taught herself chords, her fingers bled. Her voice, fragile yet unshakable, began to carry the weight of those songs. By the time she was a teenager, performing in coffee houses around Boston, people stopped talking when she sang. They didn't just hear the music, they felt it. It was as if the universe had given her a gift she didn't entirely ask for, and yet somehow she knew she had to use it. Because voices like hers, they don't come often. And when they do, they have the power to change the course of history. The gift of her voice did not remain a secret for long. From small coffee houses in Boston to intimate gatherings, Joan began to step into the light, her guitar in hand, her voice carrying the weight of everything she had absorbed. These first performances were quiet, almost private, yet they hinted at something greater, a power to move, to awaken, to turn listening into feeling. It was only a matter of time before that voice would no longer belong to the rooms where she played, but to the streets, the marches, and the hearts of a generation. Her voice had begun to ripple beyond Boston's coffee houses. Folk festivals, small tours, and word of mouth carried her songs across the country, connecting her to activists, dreamers, and those hungry for change. Invitations followed, to sing at rallies, to lend her voice where it could matter most. And by 1963, when the nation gathered in Washington for a call to justice, Joan Baez was there too. Not by chance, but because every note she had sung had quietly led her to that moment. And there, standing on the stage with nothing but an acoustic guitar and a hauntingly pure voice, was Joan Baez. Her performances weren't just concerts, they were gatherings of conscience. She sang not only about love, but about justice, about peace, about the right to exist with dignity. Songs like We Shall Overcome became anthems, carried through marches, protests, and jail cells. She was no longer just Joan Baez, the folk singer. She had become the sound of conviction itself. At the 1963 March on Washington, she stood alongside Martin Luther King Jr., her voice echoing through the air like a prayer. It wasn't the voice of anger, it was the voice of hope, fragile yet unstoppable. And for those who heard her that day, something inside them shifted forever. She wasn't looking for fame. In truth, fame was almost an inconvenience to her. What mattered was the message, that music could awaken empathy, could shake the world from its indifference. But carrying the weight of a generation's hope is never easy. While the crowds adored her, the government watched her. Her refusal to pay war taxes, her open support for civil rights and nonviolence placed her at odds with authority. Yet she never flinched. Because for Joan, the stage was never about applause. It was about truth and the belief that even a single song, sung with honesty, could change the world. The early 1960s were electric. Folk music wasn't just sound, it was a language. And for Joan Baez, it was the air she breathed. She had become the voice of a generation, and in that orbit of music, politics, and restless dreams, she met a young man with tangled hair and a storm in his eyes. Bob Dylan. When Joan met Dylan, it was like two forces of nature colliding. He was raw, unpredictable, poetic, a fire wrapped in mystery. She was radiant, principled, already a star. Together they were magnetic. Their presence in a room shifted the air itself. In those early days they sang side by side, her crystalline voice lifting his rugged lyrics into something almost sacred. Dylan would later say that Joan gave him his first real audience. Without her, maybe the world wouldn't have heard him at all. But their connection was never just about music. There was admiration, there was love. There was an unspoken understanding that both were chasing something far bigger than themselves. Their partnership became a symbol. The protest movement had its king and queen. But beneath the glow of flashbulbs and festival stages, cracks began to form. As Dylan's fame exploded, the balance shifted. The quiet coffee houses where their songs once bloomed gave way to the chaos of stadiums. Dylan was evolving fast, experimenting, pulling away from protest songs, shedding the skin the movement had wrapped around him. And Joan, she stayed true to the cause. When she joined him on tour in the mid-60s, she expected to stand beside him, like always. Instead, she found herself waiting backstage, uninvited. The man she once lifted onto the world stage had closed the curtain. It wasn't betrayal in the ordinary sense. It was something deeper, the quiet, cold distance between two people who once believed in the same fire. Joan didn't shout. She didn't fight back. She sang, she carried his songs on her own stages. She turned heartbreak into melody. Because for Joan, love, like music, was never about possession. It was about truth. By the time the decade neared its end, the image of them together had become just that, an image, a fading photograph from a revolution that was starting to lose its innocence. But in that silence, something shifted. Joan Baez was no longer just someone's voice. She was about to become her own storm. The late 1960s, America was burning with questions: war, inequality, racism, injustice. And in the middle of it all, Joan Baez kept singing. But by now, the stage had changed. It wasn't just coffee houses, college campuses, or late-night TV anymore. It was marches under tear gas. It was rallies shadowed by the thrum of helicopters. It was the haunting echo of names read out loud: sons, lovers, brothers, who would never come home. Joan refused to stay silent. While others debated, she acted. She stopped paying the percentage of her taxes that funded the war, a small gesture that meant everything. It wasn't about money. It was about conscience, about looking into the mirror and knowing she had done something when so many chose not to.
I pay 40%, which goes to highways and things like that. And then I won't pay 60% because it goes to armaments, and I think armaments are wrong.
And you'll not have any problem with not paying?
Oh, I have plenty of problems with not paying. But it's their problem.
You will overcome.
Yes.
In 1967, Joan joined nonviolent protests in Oakland against the Vietnam War draft. The government was sending young men to fight a war they didn't believe in, and Joan stood shoulder to shoulder with draft resistors. That day, the state answered not with dialogue, but with handcuffs. Joan Baez was arrested. But once again, Joan didn't flinch. She smiled for the cameras, not out of arrogance, but out of faith. Faith that one day, history would understand. And behind bars, she didn't stop singing. She sang for the women locked beside her, for the guards who pretended not to listen, for the world outside that had forgotten what compassion sounded like. In those grey prison walls, her voice became more than melody. It became defiance itself, pure, unwavering, and painfully human. Her activism wasn't performance, it was sacrifice. For every standing ovation, there were letters of hate. For every anthem of peace, there was a government file with her name on it. But the more they tried to silence her, the louder she became. Her guitar was a weapon, not of violence, but of conscience. Each chord struck like a heartbeat that refused to die. And then came August 1969, Woodstock. In a muddy field outside Bethel, beneath a swollen sky and the hazy promise of a new era, Joan walked onto that stage 7 months pregnant. Her husband, David Harris, was in jail for refusing the draft. Surrounded by an ocean of young faces, a generation's yearning rose like a tide. The festival was chaotic and sublime, a collision of idealism, music, and the messy realities of mass culture. For Joan, Woodstock was both a pinnacle and a paradox. Here was a place that celebrated peace and love, a living manifesto of counterculture, but also a spectacle where the purity of protest risked being absorbed into its own myth. Still, when she stepped to the microphone, she did what she always had. She sang with clarity and purpose. Her songs, the old ballads and the sharp-edged anthems of conscience, cut through the rumble of guitars and the roar of the crowd. In that vast field, her voice did something rare. It re-centered the festival's chaos with a quiet moral gravity. Woodstock did not make Joan Baez an activist. She already was, but it amplified her presence. Proof that the language of compassion could still reach thousands at once.
I'd like to sing you a song that is one of my husband David's favorite songs, and let me just tell you that he's fine, and we're fine too.
Yet Joan also left that field uneasy, aware that mass gatherings could heal and seduce in equal measure, and that the movement's future would demand more than a weekend of songs. Her courage inspired thousands, but it also isolated her. Even some fellow artists stepped back, afraid of being blacklisted or branded unpatriotic. But Joan never measured right and wrong by popularity. Her measure was empathy. Her currency was truth. And in a time when the world roared with violence, Joan Baez sang, not louder than the guns, but clearer. In the early 70s, when the world began to grow tired of protest songs, Joan didn't fade. She went further, all the way to Hanoi during the Christmas bombings of 1972. While American planes roared overhead, dropping death from the sky, Joan sat in underground shelters, singing for families trembling in the dark. She wasn't safe. She wasn't untouchable. But she was present, in the heart of a war, not as a soldier, but as a witness. Her voice trembled too, but she sang anyway, because silence to her was the real betrayal. Later, she would recall the sound of children crying as the earth shook around them. She would say, "I don't sing to change the world. I sing to keep it from hardening completely." And maybe that's what made her different. She didn't see peace as an ideal. She saw it as a responsibility, something you defend, even when it breaks your heart, especially when it breaks your heart. When the decade finally ended, many of her peers had given up. The movements had fractured, the slogans had faded, the dream had been commercialized. But Joan Baez, the soft-spoken girl who once trembled before a crowd, was still standing. Her voice, now weathered by time and grief, still carried the same clarity, the same defiance, the same belief that one small act of kindness, one song of truth, could still ripple across the world, even long after the crowds had gone home. The war had ended, the marches had faded into photographs, the 1970s arrived, and with them came silence. After years of giving her voice to justice and peace, the question remained, who was she when the shouting stopped? She turned inward. Her music softened, becoming personal, songs of love, loss, and longing. The fire of protest gave way to quiet strength. Even the shadow of Bob Dylan lingered not in bitterness, but in reflection, woven gently into her melodies. Every love, every memory lived inside her songs. Her voice now carried forgiveness. In the late 70s and 80s, Joan returned to the world stage, older, wiser, standing for human rights and the voiceless. The stage had changed, but her purpose hadn't. Behind the spotlight, she sought stillness, painting, writing, meditating. She often called herself a mirror, reflecting both beauty and cruelty. Even mirrors, though, need silence to heal. Her concerts became sacred spaces, quiet, intimate, reminders of kindness and empathy. In her twilight years, her voice trembled with wisdom, not urgency. It carried decades of hope, pain, and survival. There's a moment in one of her later performances, the lights are low, her silver hair catches the glow, and she smiles before singing an old song. Her voice trembles but doesn't break. It's quieter now, but deeper. You can hear the years in it, the laughter, the tears, the marches, the heartbreaks, all of it distilled into something pure. She is no longer just the voice of a generation. She is its memory. And maybe that's what Joan Baez always was, the mirror and the moon, the reflection of who we are and the light that helps us find our way back. The years passed, but Joan Baez never truly disappeared. She simply changed shape, from a protester in the streets to a quiet witness of time. Her legacy wasn't carved in monuments or awards, but in the hearts she awakened, in the courage she sparked, and in the compassion she refused to let die. She once said that the only thing worth doing is to make the world a little less cruel, and through every decade, that belief guided her. From the civil rights marches to Amnesty International stages, from candlelit prisons to concert halls, Joan's presence remained a reminder that conscience could still have a melody. Her influence reached far beyond folk music. Artists who came after her, from punk idealists to indie storytellers, carried pieces of her spirit, the belief that art can still mean something, that a song can still save a life, even if only for a moment. As the years softened her voice, it only grew more human, a map of everything she'd endured. When she sang in her later years, it wasn't about protest or fame. It was about presence, about gratitude, about surviving long enough to forgive the world. Joan Baez taught us that peace isn't a slogan. It's a discipline, an act of endurance in a world that keeps breaking itself. And even as time dims the spotlight, her voice still lingers in marches, in quiet rooms, in the hearts of those who refuse to give up. Because every generation needs a voice that reminds them kindness is radical, courage is gentle, and love still is the most defiant song of all. And maybe that's what her story tells us, that one voice may not change the world, but it can change someone's world, and sometimes that's how the world begins to change. Thanks for watching. Why are you here? Because we dig music.